Hello, everybody. Mary, did you have an introduction you wanted to give?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Liz.
Wonderful.
Right. It's really great to see you again, Liz. And I want to welcome everybody. And thank you for joining us today for our AARP New Hampshire sponsored program with the Creative Feast. And today we're going to be cooking with beer. My name is Mary Roberge. I am your host, and I'm also a volunteer with AARP New Hampshire. And as everybody knows, AARP promotes the health and the well-being of older Americans, and they've been doing this for over 60 years. Here in New Hampshire, we do strive to bring you informative, innovative, and fun virtual events like today's online cook-along demonstration. It's a means of connection and inclusion. Today's event is part of a series with the Creative Feast, which focuses on food and its impact on healthy eating. So AARP has numerous free healthy living resources on its website, from staying fit to wellness and longevity, information on healthy eating, as well as staying sharp. We have something for everyone. I have put a link in the chat, www.aarp.org/healthyliving. If you do have a question or you have a comment during this session about AARP New Hampshire or the cooking demonstration itself, please put them in the chat. And Ashley Davis, who works with me, she is the staff person from AARP New Hampshire, and she will bring those questions to Liz. Ashley?
Wonderfully rich and robust, craft beer is the secret ingredient you will want to know about. It's a delicious seasoning addition to any recipe as a marinade or baking liquid. Liz will be showing us how to use beer in today's recipes: IPA cheddar soup and double chocolate cake with Russian Imperial Stout. Chef Liz of Hollis, New Hampshire, has built her cooking career in a variety of Boston's catering and restaurant settings. After starting her family, she re-entered the food world as a cooking instructor with Liz Barber's Creative Feast. Her recipes and teaching style connected with her community, and Liz soon had a large following of loyal students. Liz is a regular guest on New Hampshire WMUR's Cook's Corner, and her cooking demonstrations and recipes are featured in various publications, including Where Women Work Cook, New Hampshire Magazine, the Nashua Telegraph, and the Hippo Press. All of her programs focus on the premise that we are healthier when we cook at home. We hope you enjoy the program. Liz, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, everyone, for joining me today. I have been looking over into the chat and seeing how many of you are joining me from all over the country. So welcome. It's so nice to have you join me here in Hollis, New Hampshire for another cook-along cooking demonstration. And today we're cooking with beer. So actually, it's so funny when each quarter, Ashley and I kind of get together by email, and I give her some ideas for my classes. And these are classes that I've decided that I will, interest me, and I think will interest you. And I was so happy that she chose the cooking with beer, because I think it's one of those ingredients that people know nothing about so far as how well it goes in your food, how to cook with it. And many of us now are really experiencing and enjoying this craft brewing world that has taken place in the past 15 years and really reaching a peak. So I'm sure there are plenty of craft breweries in your area, and they have so many different beers that you can try. And today we're doing in the cheddar soup, we're going to be, the recipe calls for an IPA, but I went to grab an IPA from the refrigerator because we always have a nice selection of beer. And my husband looked at me and he said, "Oh no, that's my favorite IPA. You can't use that." So I thought, what am I going to use instead? And so beer is adaptable to your flavor profile like many other ingredients, like wine. You might choose a sweeter wine or a drier wine, a white over a red. And it's the same thing when you're cooking with beer. And in fact, you can kind of think of beer as that item. Before I get too far into it, I just want to take you to my website, and I will be adding those recipes to the website today. But I wanted to get some pictures of them so I can put them all up. But those of you, obviously you've registered for the class, you see that the recipes are available to you and you can grab them from there. So let me just share my screen and I'll take you to my website. Let's see, here we go. And to the Creative Feast. And this is where you're going to find all kinds of wonderful things for those of you who are new. You can check out all my different programs. You can share this with your local libraries or other groups that might have a online speaker come through Zoom. If you go over to where it says events, this is where my calendar is, and just click on the calendar icon and you will see the classes that I'm doing coming up, and you can always register for those classes. Next week, a week from today, I am doing my intermittent fasting, a beginner's guide to intermittent fasting. So please do check that out. And then if we go back to the calendar, you can also see I do have my intermittent fasting classes listed here. Now, if we go over to the recipe blog, this is where you're going to have a whole lot of fun. And so feel free to browse through there. All of the recipes that we've been doing for our recent classes are there. And then you can always come over to the far right-hand side, and here are the categories. I'll be adding that beer category today along with your recipes today. So I apologize for the delay, but like I said, I wanted to get some great pictures at the end of class. So do check that out. And then of course, if you would like to join my email list, you can go to my contact page and you can join there. So let us get right into the cooking. And as I said, beer is a really interesting ingredient to be using in your cooking. So we do have a chocolate cake planned for today. I'm going to put that in at the end because, of course, I've already baked the chocolate cake to do the frosting with. So I'm just going to put a few of these things aside, and we'll bring them back out when I go to prepare the chocolate cake for you. Let me just set that aside here. Along with I did find a wonderful chocolate stout beer that I'm going to be using, but you could also use a coffee stout. You can use a regular stout. If you don't have any stout, you can use a regular beer. It's just that stout is going to add some really wonderful additional flavor. Now, the second recipe is the cheddar beer soup. And this is a wonderful soup full of flavor that I love. And I made this last night. I'm taking it to my daughter's house today. And I changed it up a little bit. I actually made the recipe, and in a separate pot, I cooked up broccoli and then added the broccoli to the prepared soup. And actually, you could add shredded chicken to that too. And then you would have this amazing beer and cheddar based chicken and broccoli soup that would be delicious. So just another thought to give to what can I add to this soup. So let's just get our ingredients out now. As I mentioned, I did not have an IPA, so I am using actually in today's beer, in mine, I am using a stout in this one because I have to say, I think that the cheddar, which is a very rich flavor, can handle this stout. And then I've got this very rich soup. If you want a flavor that's milder, that's not quite as spicy or as rich, then you can use that IPA. Now, an IPA is going to have more of what they call a hoppy flavor, which is more almost, I want to say citrusy and a little bit on the bitter side. Now, when my husband and I go out and we, go to a brewery, I tend to go for the lighter beers. I like a wheat beer. You can certainly use a wheat beer if that's what you prefer. I also like my sours. Now, I would never put a sour in a soup like this. I think sours are in a category of their own. And actually, I find that over time with the brewery craze, so many breweries are doing sours, which tend to actually be more on the Swedish sweet side. So sweet sour combination. And my own philosophy is that they're adding these and sweetening these up for women, so couples enjoy going to these breweries more. That's my own little input there. I could be completely wrong, but I see more and more breweries coming up with sours on the menu. But you also go to breweries and you'll find that they have these sometimes really crazy combinations where they add in some kind of an ingredient into the brewing process that gives an undertone of a flavor. Just like, if you read a wine critic who, may give you some ideas, this is what I think of this wine, and they tell you notes of cherry or notes of chocolate or something like that, right? Brewers are doing the same thing with their beers. So I always say, if you're going to be cooking with wine or beer, number one, make sure you like the flavor of it, because that is going to be in the flavor profile of the food that you're preparing. Now, this one, like I said, this is a default because my IPA got nixed by my husband because it was his last one. So this is a spiced imperial stout. And so this one is going to, by Clown Shoes, which again, is one of his favorite breweries. So this is going to add a real richness. But you could, last night, I had a stout that I used in my test of the recipe, and that was a maple stout. And actually, maple IPA, I really enjoyed that. It's not overpowering. And that's something to realize too, when you're looking at the descriptions of these beers, that flavor that they're adding, maybe it's coconut or maybe it's maple, it's not overpowering. It just has the essence of it. So you'll be thinking of that. So now I've got the description of the beer. Let us just go ahead and get our ingredients ready. So the first thing we're going to do is, like any soup, we're going to get our main ingredients ready. And let me just push that off to the side. So first we're going to start with a medium-sized onion, white, yellow, red, whatever you have. I tend to stick with yellow onion. And we want to dice this. We're going to do cook this up just to soften our onion first. And at the same time, I'm going to add in my my celery and my carrots. So let's just go ahead and I cut this in half, and then I leave the root intact, and then I just slice down to the root without going through. And this is how I'm going to dice this small. Now remember, the smaller you dice your vegetables, the quicker they are going to cook. We're going to cook these at a moderate heat. We're not going to cook this at a high heat because we don't want to burn that. So we want to have control over the flame. All right, so slice through down to the root. I actually have class options for doing knife skills class 2. I can't remember if we've done that actually in the past, but you can check my calendar to see if libraries are choosing those for their online classes. Okay, so there is our onion, and we're going to go ahead and get that started, and then I'll come back and cut the rest of our vegetables. So let's go over to our saucepan. To our soup pot. I am using my favorite old Dutch oven that I love. You can certainly use a heavy bottom soup pot. Just make sure that it's going to heat evenly. We want to put this over a moderate flame. We don't want this too high because we do not want to burn our ingredients. We want them to soften. So in goes our butter. I've got about a quarter cup of butter, a couple tablespoons, and we're going to go ahead and add in our onions. Now, you can also purchase your onions pre-chopped in the freezer section. And sometimes you may find in the grocery stores these days are pre-cutting these vegetables for you. You always, when you can, always want to be making your recipes yourself, because then you have full control over what is in your ingredients, what ingredients you're using, and you know they're fresh and that you have prepared them yourself. We want to keep out as many of those preservatives as possible. So when you do it yourself, you're not adding any preservatives, are you? Okay, so that's over a moderate flame. Now we'll go ahead and get the our other vegetables all set, and then we'll get everything else ready to make this wonderful soup. And I love the soup too because it is so quick and easy to make. It takes probably about 25 minutes to a half an hour at the most in total cooking time. Now, to do my celery, notice that I've turned my celery over onto its back, and I'm taking my knife and I'm cutting it into slices. Essentially, this will then allow me to line them up, and then just to chop right across. Again, the smaller I dice them, the quicker they will cook. Okay, now last night I prepared this and I did not have a carrot. I had to run out today and grab a carrot. So I made it without the carrot. Do you think that that caused the problem? No, it was fine. So if for some reason you don't have a carrot, you don't have to worry about that. I do think that an onion is a critical part. You could use a leek instead of an onion if that's what you had. But I think onions are critical, and I personally really love the celery, so I will always do that. But if you didn't have celery, again, it wouldn't be the end of the world. Now we're just going to dice this up nice and thinly. And notice too, with my carrots, what I did was, rather than cutting this while it's still rounded, I cut it in half, and now I have two flat sides. So it's so much more safe, right? It's not, this carrot is not rolling around on my cutting board. All right, so I'm just going to dice this up. Now, could you put this in your food processor? Yes, you can. I wouldn't, make this into a puree, but I can see that you could, throw this through the little shredder of the food processor if you wanted to. Our goal is just to make sure that they're all the same size, and that it's easy for you, right, to prepare these. I don't think I would use frozen in this because I do like all the natural sugars that come out in the fresh. Now I'm just going to go ahead and add these to our onions. Okay, and again, this is all just softening up. Okay, we don't want this to be too high. You want it over a moderate flame because we do not want to burn those. So I'm going to lower that flame down. I'm going to get my garlic. So give each clove a good whack. All right, and you're going to break off that outer skin. All right, and then we're going to just chop those up. Now we are going to puree this soup, so these don't have to be perfect. You cut off that little end piece.
Liz, we do have a question in the chat.
Sure.
So one of our guests asks, if you're making this soup for 1 or 2 people, do you recommend having the recipe, or is this a soup that could be frozen and eaten later?
Yes, you certainly could freeze this and have it later. What I would do is, on reheating it, reheat it really slowly and probably whisking through. But certainly you can cut this in half by all means. But I will tell you, you'll be surprised at how much you love the soup. And then remember, I gave you at least one other way that you can take this soup and add even more delicious items to it. So you can use this soup for a base of other expanded stews or things like that too. So, but yes, you can cut this recipe in half for sure. Now, in order to make this go just a little bit faster, again, our goal here is just to really soften up our vegetables, to bring out those natural sugars, to break down the cells in there as part of the softening. You can cover that, and then you're essentially making, creating a steamer. Okay, so it's sauteing from the bottom, but it's also steaming. So this will help to speed up the softening of the vegetables in that step. Now we're going to be using milk. I always use whole milk. I never use low-fat milk or non-fat milk. We now know that we want to get those really good healthy fats in our diet. So we want to use whole milk in this. It actually, having fat in this will help to essentially thicken this. So we want to keep that as a whole fat milk. I'm also using, I make my own chicken stock and chicken broth. You can certainly use, and let me just grab what I've used as a broth, or kind of like a bouillon. Okay, this is one of my favorites, the Better Than Bouillon. This is a great brand if you're going to buy at the grocery store. What I like about this brand is it is a paste, and so it will keep in the refrigerator for up to 18 months. And all you do is you use a teaspoon per cup of water. So whatever recipe you're having, you'll have that. And this also adds a wonderful base flavor. So rather than opening up a full can of broth, or if you're buying the box of broth and you only use a cup of it, what do you do with the rest? You could certainly freeze it if you wanted to. I just like the convenience of the Better Than Bouillon products. And of course, they have them for all different kinds of broths. Now, this large one I got at Costco, but at the grocery store, they're much smaller. So I find those to be very convenient. They get high ratings from Cooks Illustrated. So it's a really great option. Now, if I'm just going to share with you my screen, I want to take you to my recipe blog, and let me show you my, let's go down to soups and stews. And I'm going to show you, there is a wonderful recipe here for you to make your own chicken stock. And I think it's just a wonderful thing to have. And obviously it's useful, especially when you freeze. So here's a chicken stock with the Instant Pot, but also I have information on how to make it, how to make this on the stovetop. But you're going to get so many more nutrients out of a real chicken when you make it yourself, and you'll get that wonderful gelatinous effect. And that's by using chicken feet. Any part of the chicken that has joints will give you all of that collagen that's so important. So by all means, get yourself, make your own stock. It's easy, and and then you can freeze it for any time. So we have our chicken stock, and then of course we have our beer. So we're going to be adding that in a little while. Now we also have some seasonings. So I want to put that together, and let me just, for one quick second, I want to go check over at the stove and see how this is going. Okay, and when you open it, always open with the steam away from your face. And now these are softening up beautifully. Okay, so it's only going to take just a few minutes. All right.
Liz,
Quite, yep.
we just have one more question. Thanks. One of our guests is wondering if there's a difference between chicken broth and chicken stock.
That is one of those funny questions. So I would say that I guess technically a stock is going to be more of the jointed meat and more vegetables in the preparation. Broth, you can make a chicken broth just using like a whole chicken and or maybe just chicken breasts. Actually, I was talking with my sister, and she just discovered, she said, oh my goodness, I made a chicken broth using chicken wings. And she said, and after it came out of the refrigerator, after I cooled it down, it was thick like Jello. And I said, well, you made a chicken stock because that pulled all of the nutrients, all of the collagen out of those joints from those chicken wings. But in a pinch, if you want to make a broth, it's more, you can use your chicken breast, chicken skin, if you have that on there. It's just going to be a milder flavor. You're going to get the most nutrient packed, the most flavor out of actually creating a stock, which is going to be cooked longer and have much more to it. So I hope that answers your question. All right, so we are going to go, as soon as these are sauteed and softened, because we definitely want them softened, we're going to be adding our flour, which is part of the thickening process to the soup. So we're going to add the flour. We're going to cook up the flour just a little bit so that you cook out that floury flavor. And then we're going to add our liquids, and that will create the base of our soup. I'm going to turn on the oven for my cake just to have that ready. We do have some flavoring that we want to do here. So this is, we're going to add this in, and this adds a real wonderful backbone to the dish. So we have a teaspoon of dry mustard. Now, I have always used Coleman's dry mustard. It's a wonderful thing to have in your pantry. And did you know that you can make your own mustard very simply with a dry mustard and some spices and vinegar? So it's a real simple condiment to make yourself, and then you know exactly what's going in it. But anyway, so here is a teaspoon of my dry mustard, and then a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. Another one of those condiments, always have it in your refrigerator. It never goes bad. And you just never know, if you are making a stew, like a beef stew or something, or even a chicken stew, and it's just missing something, adding something like Worcestershire sauce to it will really liven up the flavor, because there are a lot of spices in that. And of course, there's some salt in there, but it will help to liven up the flavor. So this is going to be one of those little flavor additives that we're going to be adding here. All right. Now let's go ahead and, the cheddar. So here is, I got the sharpest cheddar I could find at the grocery store. So a nice New York extra sharp cheddar. And I grated it myself. One thing to note, and I think I've mentioned this before, when you buy cheeses that are pre-shredded or Parmesan cheese that's already grated, look at the back of the package. The manufacturers do put in some kind of a anti-caking agent. Oftentimes it is some kind of a starch. So if you're watching your carbohydrates, you have to keep that in mind. But if you're using that cheese in a recipe and you don't want it to be too thick, right? Just know that that cheese, probably already grated, has some kind of a thickening agent in it. So you want to keep that in mind. I just started grating my own because honestly, I don't want additives put into my food. Our body does not understand, nor is it equipped to process all of these additives that we have in our food. And this is where we start to find health issues building up over time. A lot of those are coming from the foods that we're eating, unless you are using whole foods in your cooking. And that's what we're trying to do here today. All right, now I'm going to go ahead again and check over at our vegetables. And I think that extra couple of minutes has done the trick. All right. And so now it's time to add our flour to this. Now, again, remember the flour is the thickener in our recipe. All right. And we do want to heat the flour, cook the flour in our fat. We've got butter in there. And by the way, if you wanted to substitute olive oil for butter, you can do that, no problem. But we want to cook our flour so that it takes away that pasty, floury flavor. And it also helps to enact it for its thickening. The other thing too is we want to add it at this stage so that if you added it later and just stirred it in, you'll find that it would clump. Here, it's mixing with that butter and it's cooking off that flour flavor, and you won't have any of those flour clumping that you might otherwise have. All right, so we're just gonna let that cook for about a minute. Again, we don't want to brown, we just want to add that in there. And then we're going to add our ingredients one at a time, our wet ingredients, and slowly stir so that we don't get those clumps and we keep this nice and smooth, okay? And then we're gonna let that cook out for a minute and then add in our flavoring. I'm just gonna put this over by the stove so we have it. And of course, I do have some salt and pepper here that are going to be wonderful additions. So Ashley, do we have any questions before I head over to do the thickening?
We are all caught up right now. Thank you.
Excellent. Great. Okay. All right. Well, let's go on over. I'm going to take my broth over. I've got my beer, of course, my salt and pepper, and we're all got everything over here getting ready. We're going to add our milk. All right. And so in that goes very slowly. And at this point too, we can start to raise the temperature up. Because of course, most of us are putting these things in, they've come out of the refrigerator. And so they're a little bit cold. Mine have been sitting at room temperature for a little bit. So now at this point, we don't want to bring our soup to a boil. We just want to bring it up to a nice simmer. If you boil it, I would be cautious about that because you could essentially burn the milk, etc. We don't want to do that. Okay, and now in goes our chicken stock or broth, whatever it is that you're using. And then finally is going to go in our beer. Now remember, I'm using a much darker beer than you are probably, so this is going to come out to be a nice dark soup. This has got a wonderful stout in there, so this is going to be a very rich blend. Maybe not something you want to do as your first endeavor with a with your IPA cheddar soup. But I can show you, let me bring over my other pot just to show you what I have here. And this is the soup that I made earlier. Let me just bring it over to here, just so you can see. I'll get a little bowl and we can pop some of that in there so you can see. This is the color difference, and already you can see this is much lighter than the other. And here you can see that I've added my broccoli to that. And I'll be honest, I'm just going to set this aside so we can look at the color difference later. I used frozen broccoli, which I love. I love having frozen broccoli on hand because then I can always add it to something like this. So I bumped up the nutritional value by adding that broccoli in there as part of the flavor. Okay. And so we're going to let this come up to a gentle simmer. And I'm going to, after that happens, I'm going to add in my seasoning, which is going to be the mustard along with the Worcestershire sauce, and let that cook out for just a second. And then we're going to very slowly add in our cheddar cheese, and that will do the final thickening. Cook that up, and then that is ready to serve. So you can see how quick and easy that is. Now for condiments, we have bacon. So I made my bacon nice and crispy, chopped that up after I cooked it. And let me give you a little hint. I always cook my bacon in the oven, and that way I don't have it splattering all over the kitchen. So all you need to do, I take a sheet pan, I line it with parchment paper, and then I lay my bacon slices on it. Generally, I cook my bacon at about 375, 400 degrees, depending on how thick it is. Just keep an eye on it. You don't have to turn your bacon over. Just cook it as thick as you want it, take it out, and then put it on paper towels, and you're all set to go. So it's a really excellent way to make your bacon without creating all that mess and splatter by cooking it on the stove top. You can also cook your bacon in your air fryer. I've done that a couple times, and that works out beautifully. And some people do it in their microwave. I've never gotten the hang of that, but I have my bacon and I have my scallions, and that will be for our final soup. So before we add in our cheese, I want to put the halt on that. We are going to puree our soup first, then we're going to add our cheese in. So we want to make sure that we take that in stages. Sometimes you forget, and if that were the case, I don't think it would make any big noticeable difference. But believe me, if there's a mistake to be made out there in the food preparation, I've made it. So I don't want to do that. So just want to make sure that we're all set with that. Pop these guys off to the side. Just bringing that up to the simmer.
We have a few questions about the flour that you added.
Yes.
We had someone wondering if you should sift the flour. They said that they use something called Wondra while cooking because it resists the clumping.
Oh, okay. Again, I've not had that issue, but if it is clumped before you put it in, sifting would certainly help. But again, it is important with the addition of the flour to add it to the vegetables to give it that 30 seconds to 1 minute to actually cooking in whatever fat you use, chicken or olive oil. So just keep that in mind. Again, the idea of just adding that Wondra to the broth, it's still possible to clump because of the flour's resistance to absorbing the water or the liquid. So it's just much easier and kind of safer to do it in the other direction.
Great, thank you. And then someone else was wondering how long flour needs to cook until it's no longer considered raw.
I would say at least 30 seconds to a minute is what I would do. Okay. All right, now we've gotten that up to the simmer. All right, and I think I'm just gonna let this, gonna grab my immersion blender. So this is where I love my immersion blender. So I highly recommend having one of these because now I don't need a blender. So I've got, this is my Breville brand immersion blender. And so this is going to be real handy for taking over to the stove. So I'm going to bring it over to the stove. I'm going to make sure I have enough cord from my outlet to do that. And you can turn off your heat. And then this just goes right in. And our goal here is to puree everything. Okay. And this is a wonderful tool because it also, you can purchase this with a whisk attachment. So you can use it for making egg whites, for whipping egg whites, whipping with cream, all kinds of things. You can use it as a small whip. So it's really handy. Okay, so just puree that. I find that if I tip the pot, all of the goodies will come down into the area where the immersion blender is and all get pureed. So there we go. Now they're all pureed. I'm going to take off that attachment and just put that over into the sink. And then we want to bring our heat back up. So we're going to add over a moderate flame, again, bring it up to the simmer. I'm going to add that flavoring. So remember, this is my Worcestershire sauce and my dry mustard. Okay. Now this is velvety. This is so lovely. And again, it's darker because I used a stout in this, but if you're using an IPA, it'll be a much lighter color. All right. And so that flour is doing its job by making this wonderfully velvety. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and handful by handful, add in our cheese and just let that melt. And that will add to the flavor, but also add to as a thickener. And again, this is cheese that I grated myself. This is a very sharp cheddar. And this is delicious. And I'm just going to add the last of that in there. There we go. And this soup is essentially done. All right. And then you can serve it hot, of course, or you could let it come to room temperature, refrigerate it, and reheat it to serve another time. Make sure that when you're reheating that you're going nice and slow on the reheat, because you will have the cheese and everything settling to the bottom until you whisk that in well. So it's much easier, especially with the flour, because it's a thickened soup, to go ahead and do it heat that up nice and slow. Okay, so this is wonderful. And I'm just going to pull that off the heat, and I will get this into a bowl at the end of class so you can see how lovely that is. All right, and then we'll get ready to prepare our cake. Oh, also, you're going to add some salt and pepper, so about a teaspoon of salt and a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper. And then, of course, you can do that to taste. Remember, your cheese is going to have salt in it, and you've just added about 4 cups if you're doing the whole recipe. So you do want to taste and see if the salt content is where you would like it. All right. So that is all set. And now it's time to get on to our cake. And I've got a couple of things to share with you on that. So the first thing, what I love about this cake is that I don't have to use a mixer or a blender. I can do it all very easily and by hand. So that makes it, real simple for me. I'm just going to grab my instructions. So the first thing is that you do want to put your oven at 350 degrees. So we want to preheat that. And then we want to get our springform ham ready. I'm going to do that while this is kind of cooking up, so I can show you how to do that. And then we want to, in a large saucepan, we are going to heat our stout. So like I said, I found a chocolate stout. Now at some grocery stores and most beer stores, you can buy single bottles. So you may want to, rather than buy a 6-pack or a 4-pack, if you can find a beer store in particular, they will often let you come in and buy a single can or a single bottle of different types, and then you can make your own sets. So that's something to keep in mind. So we're going to do 1 cup of our stout. All right. And do be careful. Like, I just poured this badly because I got a nice head on there, right? So let me just show you. I'm going to pour this into a different container and show you the best way to pour your beer, because we don't want that head, because that will kind of give us a wrong reading. So if you pour your beer down the side of your container nice and slow, okay, then that will avoid getting that frothy head on there, and you'll be able to read the amount that you have in here more accurately, right? Because the head will obscure that. So there is that. And then I'm going to add this that I totally botched earlier, again, down the side, nice and slow. And of course, this beer can be room temperature. Whenever I bake, I try to have all of my ingredients at room temperature. Now, what if you did not want to make this, add the beer to this cake? What could you use instead? I would just use milk. You could use milk, and that would be your liquid. So we do need a liquid. And in this case, we're focusing on beer. So that's where this wonderful chocolate stout is. So we're adding that, and we're also adding our butter. Okay. So we've got 8 ounces or 2 sticks of an unsalted butter. get my little spatula. I love having these tiny little spatulas. I have so many of these. I find them very useful. And then of course, you can use your butter paper to help grease your pan. So I'm just going to set that to the side. Room temperature, again, that just makes everything happen that much faster, easier to blend, including the eggs. Whenever you're making a batter and you're using eggs, and maybe your recipe has you creaming the eggs and the sugar, or the butter and the sugar, and then you're adding in the eggs. If you add eggs that are at room temperature, they won't curdle, okay, and they'll blend in much easier. Okay, so I'm just saving this paper to help with my pan. So we have our stout beer and the butter, and I'm going to place this over medium heat. And the goal here is to melt our butter. Okay, and let me just get that started. All right, and do use the larger saucepan because ultimately we're going to mix the entire recipe in this saucepan. So the larger the better. And how do I know that? Because I first made this with a small one and then I was scrambling to get a larger one ready. Now we're going to be adding to that the sugar and the cocoa powder. I have found that, I'm just going to grab a bowl here. It is much easier to add the sugar and the cocoa. Let me see if I have a smaller bowl. This is all right. If I add them, first stir them in together. Cocoa powder is acts a lot like flour in that it doesn't absorb liquid easily, so it often will clump and sit on the top of something. So I found, that stirring the sugar and the cocoa powder together in advance of adding it to our melted butter and stout, that is the easier way to go. It works really wonderfully. Okay. And certainly if you were to sift the cocoa powder, that would be good too, because sometimes it clumps. Now, you could get a really nice, dark, rich cocoa powder if you want. You don't need to use the Dutch cocoa powder, although we are adding baking soda, so that would kind of, I think that takes away the alkaline. I don't know. It's always confusing to me what Dutch cocoa powder is versus the regular cocoa powder. All I know is my grocery store only has Dutch cocoa powder around the holidays. Anyway, so we have that all set. Again, just waiting for those other ingredients to melt. So that'll take a few more minutes. In the meantime, we're going to get our wet ingredients ready. So this is, common when you are baking is to combine your wet ingredients in one bowl and your dry ingredients in the other, and then you bring them together. So here I have sour cream and about 3/4 of a cup. Now, if you don't have sour cream, go right ahead and use yogurt. Again, I would use a plain low full fat yogurt. If you don't have yogurt and you don't have sour cream, go ahead and use full fat milk. That's fine. You could use a buttermilk if you have that. I've used all of these as substitutes because I don't typically have milk on hand. I've started doing, I like sour cream all of a sudden, so I have it always, but if you just had yogurt, you can use that. These are going to add a little bit of, they'll cut the sweetness a little bit because sour cream and yogurt tend to have a little bit of a lemony flavor to it. So you can do that. And I've got 2 farm fresh eggs here. So mix that in. All right. But they're also these thickened, like sour cream and yogurt, they're going to add a little bit more moisture to your cake. So that's something that you might like. If you want to add even more moisture to your cake, you know, you'll find with a box recipe, you can do a lot of things to that. What if you said to me, Liz, I'm into the box thing. I am not into the baking from scratch. Can I make, using a box cake, can I make this cake? Yes, you can. So what I would do is take that box cake, and the first goal would be to bump up the flavor, okay? So what you can do is, say we're using a chocolate devil's food cake out of a box, Betty Crocker. So take that, and instead of, if it calls for water in the recipe or milk, you're going to be adding your stout as that moisture replacement. Also, if it calls for vegetable oil, I do not ever use vegetable oil. I use butter. Vegetable oil is inflammatory. I don't use canola oil. Always use melted butter instead. Okay. Now, oh, I think somebody probably said, hey, Liz, that is coming to the boil. So let's go ahead and add in our next ingredient. So we're going to our mixture here, add in our butter and our cocoa. And then another thing you can add to a box cake, when you are adding, for example, if you wanted to do beer, or if you wanted to do milk or water in your box cake, heat it up. Because when you heat it up, it helps to activate the cocoa. So what I'm doing here is, by adding the sugar and the cocoa to the hot butter and stout mixture, is I'm really kind of activating the cocoa so that the flavor is much more intense. Okay, so that's why you want to add it to the hot ingredients. So there we have our cocoa mixture. Now I'm just going to set this over here. So we have all of those ingredients in. We're going to add to this our vanilla. And yes, it does take a tablespoon of vanilla, because this is such a rich flavored cake that you're going to add a little bit more vanilla to that, and that will add some really, you know, then it will stand out. Now, I did make a mistake in writing down the recipe. The recipe called, if you look at where it says the frosting, there it says espresso powder. That espresso powder, if you'd like, actually should go in now in here, not in the frosting. So I will make that correction when I post the recipe for you, but I just noticed that actually today when I was getting ready to get all the ingredients for the frosting. Okay.
Liz, before
Yep.
we do that, if it's okay, we have 3 questions right now. Great. So the first was a quick one. Someone was wondering what brand of chocolate stout you're using.
Oh, yeah, this is, and I always see this at my grocery store. I have for years, and this one is Samuel Smith Organic Chocolate Stout, which oddly enough is the name of my great-great-great-grandfather. So there you go. So this is an organic chocolate stout.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Someone else was wondering that if you only had a light course, if you could use something like that in the cake.
Yes, you could. And in that case, I would definitely add that espresso powder, because that's going to then lift the flavor even more.
Great,
So,
thank you.
Yeah.
The last question was just if you had a recommendation for perhaps a beer that doesn't have alcohol, one of the 0 alcohol beers that would still have a good flavor.
I think really they've come such a far way that you can, if you're getting a non-alcoholic beer, I've never purchased one, so I can't give you from my own experience, but certainly if you can find a local beer store, they can give you recommendations. But I think you can be pretty safe that you're going to look for one that has the flavor profile of a stout, and see if you could use that. Now, I'm just, as we're talking, I'm thinking to myself, well, gee, I think there are chocolate sodas out there. Couldn't you use a chocolate soda? I suppose you could, if that's what you wanted to do. So there are a lot of different substitutes that you can use. Certainly the non-alcoholic beer is going to give you that flavor of, the hops that are used in the beer. And it's a really wonderful contrast. And it just kind of cuts that sweetness just a bit. Any other questions?
That catches us up right now. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. So here I have my flour. I'm adding a little bit of salt to that. And then this is baking soda. And this is going to help, obviously, with our rising. So I'm just going to make sure that I pre-mix those up. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and here's where we make the cake. I mean, this is just so simple, right? We're going to add our flour mixture into our stout, our cocoa, our sugar, and our butter. Look at how wonderful that is. Smells delicious. And I got to tell you, this cake freezes beautifully. And it's so super moist. It's become our new favorite cake. And then, of course, when you start adding the beer to it, it's just wonderful. Now, if there's a few lumps, don't worry about it. We're going to add in our egg, vanilla, and sour cream. Okay, mixture. Add that in. And then mix that in. And our cake batter is ready. Now you see why I love this. I don't have to put this into a mixer. I can do it all in one pot, easy. And then we're going to add this to, I'm using a springform pan, but you can do this in a bundt pan if you'd like, or you could do it into 2 9-inch round cake pans if you want to do this more of a layer cake with two layers. But I did want to show you this. So this is my springform pan. And I remember as a new baker, I had no idea how to put this together. And the confusion was, do I put this with the groove up or down? So you do want to make sure that the kind of the beaded groove goes down, and this will flip right into the groove that is there in the pan. And then you just close that up. And sometimes I have found over the years, I've had to replace my my pans because sometimes they get warped or bent. And so you want to make sure, oops, I'm having a hard time with this for some reason, that they do seal tightly so that none of the batter oozes out. I don't know why that's not sitting. There we go. That's sitting. Okay. Now take your butter paper and voila, it's doing the job of buttering this very well. I've got another one here. The other thing you could do is I often will melt a little bit of butter and I will brush it on, especially when I'm using like a bundt pan that has all those grooves in it. I like to do melted butter and brush it on with a pastry brush. And then we have a little bit of flour. So we're going to put that in the bottom and then give it a good whack. And you want to get that butter, that flour all around to, hit the butter that you put in there. And that will help to release the cake after it has been baked. So you want to get it up the sides as much as you can, and then just knock out the extra. And then of course, then this all gets put right in. And oh, what a beautiful batter that is. Now, this will rise up. Okay, so you'll have a domed top to your cake. And I had no problem with that. I'm going to show you how we're going to make the frosting and then frost that together. And then we're going to be all set. Let me just you always want to get all of that good stuff out. So get yourself, I always say, get yourself at least 4 or 5 of these rubber spatulas, because you can use them many times while you're creating a recipe, and you don't want to have to then wash over and over again. Want to get all that stuff out. Perfect. Okay. And then this is going to go into the oven, and it's mine a little over 50 minutes. So you're going to test that with a dry toothpick or a cake tester to make sure that when it comes out of the oven, it is completely, put 50 minutes here. It is completely cooked and nothing comes out sticking to the edge. Now, we're going to go ahead and we can take off the spotlight to my stove camera if you'd like to do that, ladies. That will then give more viewership to the rest of the other 2 spaces. Now, here I have my food processor, and in this I have my room temperature cream cheese, again, full fat cream cheese, room temperature, and then we have our confectionery sugar. All right, so we're going to make a cream cheese frosting. And that goes right into you could certainly do this with a hand mixer if you wanted to, or do it by hand yourself. At room temperature, the cream cheese works really well. Just gets nice and soft. And then we're going to go ahead and add in our heavy cream to that. And that will make this so that we can spread this. Okay. And then while that is finishing up, I already have my beautiful cake ready for you. All right. And this is super easy. Now I used a little bit less of the heavy cream. I would start with a 1/4 cup of that heavy cream. And certainly this is ready. It's a little bit loose right now. So I'm just going to do 1 layer, and then I'm going to refrigerate the rest and then do another layer on top. But I did want to show you how easy that frosting is to make. And so that can just come right on. Now, do you have to put frosting on this? No, you don't. You could actually just do some powdered sugar on top. It would be absolutely beautiful. But this, I'm going to be taking this. I'm going to visit my daughter in her new home this evening. So we're taking that wonderful cheddar soup with us. And then we're going to take this cake. Her husband has a little bit of a sweet tooth. So I'm going to leave this cake behind for them. And then I'm going to freeze the cake that I'm making here today. So there we go. Got that. Now you can use all or some of the frosting, but I just like the way that looks. All right. So there we are with my wonderful stout chocolate cake. And let's bring over our soup. And we're going to go ahead and put this into a bowl with our wonderful toppings. And I'm also going to be posting, I have a couple other recipes, beer recipes that I have used over the years. I have a wonderful shrimp recipe made with beer that is absolutely delicious. And so I'll share that as well. And then certainly if you have a favorite beer recipe, I would love to have that. I mean, I know I went to a German festival at a friend's house, and a lot of people brought a wonderful beer and cheddar dip for pretzels, which was amazing. And I'm still looking for that perfect recipe. So if anybody has that out there, please do share. Right. Let's get this soup in. Now, here's how when you're serving soup, bring a plate over, and then you won't get any drips on the outside of your bowl. Right on over. Okay, Ashley, we're just about set. Were there any other questions before we call it a day?
There was just one more question about the cake, and they were wondering if they were going to freeze the cake, would they do that with the frosting on or before it's frosted?
Ideally, before it's frosted, but I frosted it and put it in the freezer because I knew I had a whole cake and then we had guests over. And of course there was frosting on it. And I knew if I left it on the counter frosted or left it on at all, that I would eat it. So I just took the leftover cake that had the frosting on it. I wrapped it in plastic wrap, put it into my freezer, thawed it out last week, and the frosting and the cake were perfect. So you could do either. Ideally, freeze it without the frosting, make the frosting fresh and put it on. But I've done it and it was really good. So no worries there. Any other questions?
That's it. Just appreciation and thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining me. And I'll look forward to having you in my kitchen for our next cooking adventures. But today I get to taste all of this. And I even made a wonderful corned beef and cabbage, which I had to put off. So we're going to have that tonight too. So it's going to be a really great meal. But I hope you all enjoy the spring. We're actually in spring and that you're having a wonderful beginning to your spring. And I'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you, ladies, for all of your help today.
Thank you, Liz, so much for this wonderful demonstration. I really enjoyed watching this, and I know our audience did too. We certainly learned a lot. So this is just one of our cook-along demonstrations, one of the most upcoming virtual events that are being offered through AARP, and we hope that everyone will come back and join us for more. And to learn about AARP New Hampshire's virtual offerings, which include coffee and conversations, gentle yoga, some educational webinars, and of course, more cooking demonstrations with Liz, please visit www.aarp.org/New Hampshire. And should you be interested in volunteering for AARP New Hampshire, our community team, please contact us at NHAARP@aarp.org, and we'll put those chats in the link. And we will be having our next cook-along demonstration with Liz in April. And I believe, I'm sorry, Liz, I was not prepared, but I believe it is, I don't have the date, but you can find it on our website. Thank you very much.